You're watching the news today, you're on social media, and you're looking at what conservatives are saying. You look at the whole thing, and you'll see people taking, obviously, one of two positions. They're the people who think Biden's won, that's not going to change, and he'll be inaugurated in January 2021. On the other hand, you have the people who believe that the election was stolen, that ultimately Trump's going to prevail, and he'll have a second inauguration to head off his second term in January 2021. What I haven't heard anybody discuss is what's, to me, the really big question. Assume, just for this video, assume for the sake of argument that Donald Trump does pull this out, that evidence is found and presented in court that demonstrates that there was massive election fraud back on November 3rd. What happens if that is in fact the case? What do we do? That's what I want to talk about in this video. As I said, just for the sake of argument, assuming Trump did win, assume this election was stolen from, that hundreds of thousands of votes, maybe more, were miscast by software, by old-fashioned ballot fraud, combinations of all those things. Evidence is gathered, presented, the courts overturn the election, demand revotes in certain areas, who knows what they'll do. But something happens, and ultimately, Donald Trump starts his second term in January. Now, what will happen then? Well, two things are going to have to be addressed. The first one's simple. Trump will be president for another 4 years. If, in fact, election is demonstrated, proven, and the current results are overturned, Donald Trump will be president for 4 more years. He'll have a second term, and all that implies and entails. That's simple enough. It's straightforward enough. But what else has to happen? What do we do in this country if, in fact, there was massive voter fraud reversing an actual national election for the presidency? I mean, this isn't Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson, New Jersey, you had some shenanigans, vote fraud, massive voter fraud, demonstrable, proven in court. I think they ended up having to redo the election. And certain people will be prosecuted for voter fraud, felony offense, will be fined, go to prison. Paterson, New Jersey, relatively small city in a relatively small state. But that's a different case when you get to the presidency of the United States. I mean, if there was widespread voter fraud in multiple states, at least 6, maybe more, involving officials at all different levels, perhaps involving Joe Biden himself. I mean, after all, maybe it wasn't a gaffe when he said that he was sure he was going to win because they had the largest voter fraud effort underway in the political history of the United States. Maybe it wasn't a gaffe. Maybe his mind works in strange ways. He just let out what was the truth, why he knew he would win. Because it was rigged. You ever consider that possibility? Sometimes my mother would blurt things out that were true, that, under normal conditions, she would have never said. And she had cognitive problems in her final days. Consider that possibility. But whatever. If all these officials in the DNC and the state level Democratic committees and maybe even Biden, all these people are involved in this coordinated effort to change an election. Obviously, they're guilty of voter fraud. They're probably guilty of things they could be prosecuted under the RICO Act for racketeering. for all kinds of things over state lines. There are all kinds of ways you could hit them with felony offenses and hit them with fines and imprisonment, serious prison time for something like that. But what about the broader question? If it's true, I'm not saying it is, but if it is proven to be true that high-level Democrats ran this coordinated voter fraud campaign to basically take over the United States of America through corrupted political means, is that treason? Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge, obviously. But, if the Democrats staged a coup in different states and tried to take over, that would be treason. When the Confederates in South Carolina fired on Fort Sumter, that was treason. What about non-violent political fraud trying to take over the government? You're violating the Constitution. The Constitution supposes that when people go to vote on Election Day, they'll vote freely, they'll vote openly, and their votes won't be changed. Their votes won't be manipulated by one party to support the other. Is that treason? What do we do? Not just with the people in these organizations in these states, but the organizations themselves who perpetrated massive voter fraud on a national level in an effort to elect a president. What are the implications of that? What are the implications of that for the Democrat Party? I mean, if the American Communists or the American Nazi Party or a group of jihadists loyal to ISIS, tried to overthrow the government, we know what we would do with them. But what about a political party that used fake ballots, a massive election fraud scheme, to get itself into power against the will of the people? What do you call that? Besides a felony offense, besides voter fraud. Doesn't it have to be something larger than that? And if so, what is it? What do we do about it? How do we react to that? What safeguards do we put in place so it doesn't happen again? Did we just go back in 4 years as business as usual? Are we going to let people, if let's say they assume that there was massive voter fraud in Philadelphia County, Bucks County, Montgomery County, Chester County, the counties that surround Philadelphia, do we just let them run the elections again 4 years from now or 2 years from now? Can you do that? Why won't they just do it again? If you don't change something about how it's done. Now, admittedly, all this presupposes that there was election fraud and that Donald Trump will become president for a second term. But I think in addition to all the other things we're talking about, we need to start thinking about the possibility that this might happen, that he might be, bailed out in the end by evidence of election fraud. That this election was subject to a coordinated, multi-state, if not nationwide effort by Democrat operatives to thwart the will of the people who were voting for Trump. I truly believe that in addition, I know, the immediate problem is to fight to win this election and to stop what's happening from being carried through into a Biden inauguration. But we also need to start thinking about, at least, not necessarily planning, but thinking about and considering the possibility that if it was indeed, and there's no proof yet, there's just a lot of circumstantial evidence, But if there was indeed massive election fraud on a multi-state, probably national level, coordinated at the high levels of a Democrat Party, what do we do then? Besides getting that decision overturned, besides seeing Donald Trump inaugurated for a second term, what comes next? How do we respond to this? How do we hold these people responsible? And how do we ensure that it does not happen again? And I think we need to start thinking about that now. It may turn out to be a useless exercise. Everything will become moot if, in fact, the Trump team doesn't produce substantive evidence that proves what they're claiming. But if they do, what are the implications of that for our future, our political future in this country? And that's what I think we need to start thinking about. What do you think? Let me know in a comment. Like the video, give it a thumbs up, not a thumbs down. Hit the notification button so you know when I post new videos. Share the video with your friends. Get it out there. Subscribe to the channel if you can. Show support for the channel. I appreciate that. And until the next time, stand tall, stand firm, start thinking about this. It may come to pass. And also, keep fighting.